Bog Beef. Mr. Scholar.
Ill Scholar. Sorry, I have my mic muted. I screwed it up again. I screwed that up every single time.
And on the line with us is the distinguished Dr. I can't say that name, Montalban Esquire. I'm not sure if he's on here by satellite link yet.
But he will be.
Exactly.
White Place Summer Apparel, WBSapparel.com. White Place Summer is fast approaching, and they carry the entire line of the Good Ol Boyz merchandise, which includes shirts and patches. Thank you.
About to be carrying some horizontal stripe clothes too.
Yeah. Obviously, we know why you're all here. That's not exactly why we're here, but we'll definitely talk about it for sure.
Yeah, we had a news article, a news story when we wanted to discuss. I assume nothing exciting happened in the news subsequently, right? We've had this planned for like a week.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing came up, right?
Yeah. So if you're listening in the future, about what, an hour ago, 30 minutes ago, 45 minutes ago, President Donald J. Trump was convicted on 34 counts of financial fraud and stuff like that. And of course, people are going crazy now. Yes. So we're going to be talking about Native American stuff in a bit, but let's definitely talk about the big news. I mean, I don't know who wants to start.
Well, so it was almost a foregone conclusion that he was going to get convicted on at least one count. It was funny, right before when they said they had a verdict, but it hadn't been announced yet. I composed a tweet and I said, well, I guess, the alternate theory here of why you might acquit him is that if normies are not as insane about politics as we are, if like normies are just tired of it and they just want things to chill out, and the people in the jury said, we can't do this. This is a crazy thing to do, even if you don't like the president. We shouldn't cross this line. And I said, that's not really the vibe that I get from people after 2016. And then quite literally seconds after I composed that tweet, boom, guilty on 34 counts. Yeah, normies aren't tired of this stuff. They're like everybody else. They're bored. They want to see some fireworks. They're like, hell yeah, let's go.
Before we talk about how we feel about it, I just want to ask, were you guys surprised?
No.
I was a little bit. I am a little bit. I thought that the American justice system, I had too much faith in the American justice system. And especially because it's not going to end well, right? Like this probably only helps him unless they somehow actually get him to not run. But that's like a real issue for the legitimacy of the race after that. I don't know why people aren't concerned with that. I mean, they're all about democracy, but it's all in theory.
Well, I agree. I mean, the main thing that people get that people that aren't, I have this conversation with people like my parents and stuff all the time. They kind of model, a lot of people, especially boomers and stuff, their model of the Democratic Party is that it's like MAGA in terms of like MAGA has a boss. There's like, if Trump wants X or Y, that's how it's going to be. And like, you can like go vote for somebody else or something like that. But, he's the guy that's in charge of everything. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have influences and all these kinds of things, but Democrats aren't like that at all. There's no one, and like most, in my opinion, most Republicans that are over 50, this basically doesn't make sense because they wouldn't run anything like that. They've never seen like the way like a university politics and stuff like that work. they're like they're like, well, someone's in charge. It must be Barack Obama or someone like that. There's someone that must be taking responsibility for this machine that's saying we should convict him, we shouldn't. This will be good for us in November. That person doesn't exist because Democrats, they're not like that. They're not like that. They don't like big man stuff. That's what we like. We're not like them. They're different.
Well, yeah, in oligarchy, there is no one guy that you can come to, especially in oligarchy and monarchy. And I mean, not that. Unfortunately, the Republican Party is not actually a monarchy. I know that you had the great quote in the run-up to the 2020 election that the GOP is now functionally that a monarchical party. It's all about one guy. And as far as the voters are concerned, that's true. But like the actual levers of power within the party, they're not that. But this confuses normie Republicans because I don't know. I'm not trying to sound mean about it. Just if you haven't thought a lot about politics, it's not readily apparent that the Constitution doesn't exist anymore, and that all this stuff that you learned in sociology class and American history class are fake. But they just don't realize that. They're going to be shocked if President Donald J. Trump is put in prison come July. They'll be shocked. But they shouldn't be.
Do you this is like there's like a culture shock thing with this, and for a lot of people they'll just never get the culture. They'll just continue to assume like, okay, yeah, but like because I would never run my business like this, or I don't know of like there's no functional institution that runs like this. Obama must be in charge or something like that. So you have these moments like you think about like World War II when the Germans sort of first they had the first engagements with like human wave tactics and stuff, and like at that point, like regardless of what you think or feel or all that stuff, you like I don't think any of them could have been able to model that in their head. They couldn't have said like, okay, they're just going to march human waves at us. They're going to give one guy a rifle and one guy a magazine of ammunition. They'd be like, no, like, they have a whole military. They have guys with uniforms and stuff. They do basic training. No one would do that. So, I don't believe that's fake. When they're coming at you, they were like immediately every guy picked up a pen and wrote home, and they were like, yeah, this is not like I expected. This is a completely different world than I understood. But I guess the best example of like how you could think of this is so like the average conservative MAGA person, they love Trump, and like there's not anything that he could do to really disappoint them without outside of just in normal stuff. The Democrats, they have this, they operate different. They have this, they call this the chop down the tall tree syndrome. They will elevate someone to super leadership and throw them in the garbage, no problem. The same people who who would throw Trump in jail, they throw a Biden or Hillary Clinton in the garbage if it was convenient, or if they got too big for their britches. They don't like anybody getting too big for their britches. That is they are very, 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 very sensitive to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only, I guess, unpleasant for them to have a person who has actual authority. It's very counterproductive. The whole model, the oligarchical model, requires there to be these, like, a very vague and open power situation where you can make little plays and you can do this and you can increase your influence by doing things that are, in the Machiavelli sense, like, Fox stuff. You can scheme. When there's an actual hierarchy, a chain of command, you can scheme, but it can get you killed. It can get you put in prison. Legitimately, you're not allowed to scheme against somebody higher up in the chain of command.
If you're if you run Austria and I'm a liberal and I run I run France or something, you raise 20,000 more troops than I have, I'm going to call everybody else and say we got to go f Merrick up. He's getting too big for his britches. He wants to be in charge. Now, like, why do I bring this up? The point of this is that like the basic conservative response to this stuff is like, okay, well, I don't understand. They're like, you start coming up with weird answers for like, well, why would the Democrat mother brain decide to do this? Why, when they planned all this stuff out, why would you make this decision? Whereas that's not how any of this works. This could be this one guy in New York is like, man, I'd love to get elected next time around. This will really get my name in papers. Put a president in possible jail, etc. That's all it takes. That's how their machine runs. They legitimately are egalitarian in this way.
And they love to eat their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to dish out a little medicine here, and it might not taste good for everybody, but right now, if you were Donald Trump, you should be thinking about how you reacted to January 6th and the things that you did not do that perhaps in retrospect you should have done, because the kind of loyalty that he engendered on that day might not be forthcoming in the future if they decide to throw him in jail. They have multiple choices here. They could put an ankle bracelet on him and make him not campaign. Although I wish Fredo was here, because I don't know how in New York how the sentencing will actually work. I mean, can he appeal right after sentencing, or could the judge just literally toss him in the jail immediately? I would assume he's able to do that. So he could be given probation. He could be given community service. He could be in house arrest, or they can throw him in jail for 4 years. There are people who you could have relied on them to not, I guess, allow that to happen. I'm trying to get us in trouble here. There were people who were going to stop Congress from removing him from the presidency on January 6th. I think there will be a lot fewer of those people now, because they saw what happened, or rather what didn't happen, when they are set rotting in prison for the last 2 to 3 years.
So I don't think Trump is going to make any rash decisions at all. Basically, if you listen to his quotes about these kinds of things, like he's like, everything has always worked out for me. I really have no reason to worry. Like, I go to jail. I go to court. We go to appeal. I do this. Like, so, Trump is a law-abiding citizen, and there's nothing that can push him there. And he's very white-pilled guy. And it's good for people to be like that. That's a great attitude to have, especially if you're in that business. However, that's not all. Like, this is one of the reasons why I like, why I've been pushing the Erik Prince thing so much. Is you could look at Erik. So Erik Prince is like, he's just as successful. He's a billionaire, very successful in all kinds of ways. He's not that, like, him not being cheery and sunny all the time isn't bad. It's just a different sort of alignment. There's different kinds of people, you can see Erik Prince. This is a guy obviously is worries about things like this could go really wrong. I should do X, Y. Trump's not that guy. He's like, everything will be fine. It'll be great. It'll be awesome. So I don't think that'll come from Trump. It doesn't have to. He's obviously going to build a political corporation here. Hopefully, we don't know who will take it over. I think that'll have to come from somebody who's not so, from someone who worries.
Okay, so Trump when he had a press conference after the trial, he said it was a rig, it was a sham, and that the real verdict will be in November, right? November 5th. Ask Nixon how that worked out. It don't matter. yeah, you can get the most votes, you can win the election. They can still keep your ass in jail. And as you pointed out, there have been very recently a very high profile criminal in prison in Manhattan who quote unquote killed himself. And I assume that with Secret Service protection, you're gonna you know that's not as much of an issue, but I don't know. I would definitely not have the white pilled, oh, it's all going to work itself out attitude in this situation. And that's kind
but
of
that's not him.
Right, I know, but that's kind of what leads you to this position where you don't, kind of like the meme, you don't know what time it is. He got into something he didn't realize what he was doing. He didn't realize the hornet's nest he was kicking, because I think it seems like he really
he's so what? Because he doesn't worry.
right.
Yeah.
The idea here was like, well, I'll run for office and I'll say these things about immigration and I'll do a little bit of stuff to annoy the bureaucracy. I will name the deep state, but it's all part of the the political cycle. I want an election, I can do that. They'll have to put up with it for 4 years. No, they don't have to do that. They can have the CIA investigate you and impeach you. They can perhaps do other things to you, as the president before Johnson found out. There are no rules that they have to play by. And like, I understand for somebody like him, that would be a culture shock, because yeah, he's this guy who's been in charge, kind of floated on his own personal, I don't know, social skills, genius, money, whatever. He was able to just ride it out, go on vibes. That's not going to work here. And if he does that, if he continues to do that, he's going to be in even more trouble than he is now. I hope that doesn't happen. Like, I would like to believe that they said, well, we've slapped the felon title on him now. We can put him in house arrest or probation or whatever, and we don't have to escalate this. But does that sound like them? Does that sound like anything they've done? I believe the sentencing happens like a week or a couple days before the Republican National Convention. So let me run down my theory about this, and I don't think you need to be a brain genius to see this one coming. If you slap a 4-year sentence on the guy who's the front runner for the nomination before the nomination happens, that's 4 days for the people in charge at the Republican National Convention to scheme and to decide, well, we would have loved to have nominated President Trump, but we can't do that. Or make a deal with him about who's going to be vice president. Because if they imprison him, then whoever's vice president is actually going to be really important for once in an election, assuming that he even wins. And that's the other option, the boring, but it's possible that normies will see this. They'll see this guy got convicted on 34 counts. He's a felon, and he's on trial. He's going to be on trial in federal court as well. How many people do you think that could peel off? I mean, it could be enough to swing the important states and get Joe Biden reelected anyway.
I don't know. Do people really care, especially swing voters? Like, I feel like people are going to view this positively. Hopefully. Also, Erik Prince follows me on Twitter. I need to get that out. I don't know why, but I love it.
Slide into them DMs.
So I agree. I think that I don't think that the conviction is that big of a deal, except for concerns about his personal security. So
yeah,
that I do think. And by the way, I've been looking at what people are saying, but I've also been looking at people who've his worked for him say, and and you can go on Twitter and go Google people that were in his cabinet and stuff and go look at their Twitters. They don't seem as unworried about this than others. Like, a lot of them do seem very, very concerned about this, which that did tell me something. But now
some of them got rolled up in the other trial, the one in Georgia, right? People close to him are suffering consequences from this too.
Now, what I do think is that should be taken very, very very much into account. I know everyone's like, yeah, you just gotta, you just gotta roll. You just gotta have a bright, sunny attitude to everything. Everything will always, yeah, that's cool. Except for someone should be very worried about his personal security. The Senate Republicans, the House Republicans, do need to do something to ensure his personal security. He needs to be able to have his own security there at the prison, or if he does, even if he's booked overnight. I'm sure that they can't throw him in jail for years for whatever this sort of accounting fraud or whatever. But I mean, like, even if they got him overnight, like, that's all they need, or whatever. So that would be my main concern, is his physical security, because I mean, this is the United States. You know how we do business. I mean, we do this every day. It's like Putin. I don't agree with the war in Ukraine. I think we should pull out. However, like, I'm not naive about what happens if you piss off Putin. You know what I'm saying?
As Bolero 393 says, there's nothing stopping them from doing another election fortification, in which case, what Fredo said he thought would probably happen might very well happen. The President Trump goes to jail and he dies in prison. That is definitely an option, especially if he does not win that election and get seated in 2025. There's a darn good chance of that happening. I mean, just they went light on Nixon, relatively speaking, because he backed down, but they're not doing that this time. This is a whole new level.
But aren't they, like, number one, aren't people like you said but we had just talked earlier about how there's nobody really in charge, and I think that's even how this happened in the first place. Like, this woman, this seems like she was a lone wolf, like in the sense that just came out, and that doesn't mean they didn't add in support later or apply pressure to the jurors or something. Like, I don't know, I haven't seen any evidence of that, but who knows what went on behind the scenes. But, like, this could get out of their control really quickly, and then what happens then? Or if there is some unaliving going on, possibly, like if that's the plan, to Epstein somebody, then how do you think people are going to respond to that? Like, because I think that they, like, the people in on the side that wants to see him in prison and not be able to be president, I think that they're aware of how unprecedented and scary that situation could get very quickly. Nothing ever happens, but who knows what would happen if like Trump dies, or is, sorry, YouTube and Twitch, under possibly nefarious circumstances. I think people would take that very, very poorly.
I think the only reason I do bring up the personal security thing so much is I don't really see this as like a well, we need to ensure that Joe Biden remains president or something like that. I see this as because of his sort of direct threats towards the federal police, essentially. Who, this is why I bring up the Putin example. It's like the reason why Putin poisons people who piss him off is because, well, I mean, that, if his dad ran a newspaper, I don't think he'd do that. He would smear them or something. But he made his bones in the KGB, and so if they had a problem with people, they kill them. So that's just his world. Now, there's a lot of people with really nice houses in DC suburbs, who do dirty deeds for a living, and Trump has more or less announced that if he's elected, a lot of them won't be employed. And,
well, yeah. Remember what the senator, a man who was in office at the time, said when Trump got elected. He goes, "I wouldn't talk about the deep state like that. Those people have 5 ways to Sunday to mess you up," and they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Straight up.
They really do.
The because of the way the American legal system, early in the show you said you had faith in the American justice system, and I think most people, no matter how cynical they pretend that they are, they do. You just you think, well, the X can't really happen. We're not actually a banana republic, but the only things, with federalism, as we see with New York and to a lesser extent with Georgia, because there's actually been some backlash in Georgia because there are, there are Republicans who are actually in office and have power there. In a place like New York or California, you can do whatever you want. The only thing stopping you would be what they call optics, right? This is not something I should do. It looks bad, or reciprocity, and that's pretty much how we've mostly done it over the course of American history. Obviously, over time, that was slowly eroded, starting in the 1870s with the Justice Department and, what the Republicans did then. But this has kind of been a long time coming. There's really nothing stopping you from doing this. Even if Donald Trump won the presidency or another Republican, people seem to be confused about this. The president can't pardon him in New York. He has no power. If they throw him in a New York prison, he's stuck in that New York prison. The president of the United States has no control over someone in state jail for state crime. He can release federal prisoners. He can't do anything about that. So if, for example, your party had control over, let's say, the state where Manhattan, where a lot of the financial stuff happens, and the most populous state in the country, where a lot of the tech stuff happens, you have home court for lawfare. As Ricky Vaughn found out, he wasn't even in New York, and the federal government dragged him up there. I mean, Donald Trump could pardon him, but he can't pardon himself. And this is going to become an issue more and more. One would think that someone like Trump, and I won't say the Republicans because their party is just kind of fake, but if you're really seriously trying to run for office and actually do the stuff that, the popular stuff, whatever, you need to reckon with that and A, use it for yourself, and B, be prepared to be dragged into the court if you step foot in New York, and be prepared to have a plan for how you're going to drag your enemies into court in places favorable to you. I know that sounds terrible, but that's where you are at this point. You don't get to choose the rules of the game. You just have to abide by them. You only get to choose the rules if you're in charge. And well, if the icon of your party, most popular politician, Republican politician in 40 years, can be arrested, tried, and convicted on bullshit charges about hush money to a prostitute or whatever, then obviously you're not in charge. You're not in charge of anything.
That didn't even happen while he was running, by the way.
Yeah.
This rested on the assumption, it rested on the idea that he knew he was going to run at that time and that this was intended on helping his candidacy. That's where it comes from.
Right.
And these other assumptions, it was through a shell company, a lawyer, and it's just, no one's going to talk about the actual evidence because they don't want to, but it's clearly people have done worse stuff. I mean, Obama drone striked weddings in an American teenager. So what are we doing here?
It's not even really clear that he committed a crime, and I don't mean that in he's innocent because I like him, but it's from a legal standpoint, it's not really clear that he actually committed a crime himself. Of course, that doesn't matter. None of that matters. The whole point of lawfare is to drag your enemies into court. If you were living in the late Roman Republic, you would recognize what this is. This is the origin story of Caesar. Eventually, if you do this enough, you will try it on the wrong person, and blood will be spilled.
I don't think that guy is Trump. I don't think it's going to happen with him. But this is going to create a situation where it is going to happen.
But and then the other thing,
Caesar wasn't the first guy doing what he was doing. The other guys just weren't.
They didn't have an army.
They weren't
That's the
military,
difference.
Hall of Fame military guys. They had killed Saturninus. They killed the Gracchi. They killed a bunch of guys that were doing the same things that got Caesar in trouble, but they got whacked. They eventually messed with a guy that was too badass to mess with.
Yeah,
Same thing with Martin Luther.
That's perfect. Yeah, they how many? When they burned the guy at the stake. That they said Martin Luther translated the Bible. He wasn't the first one. There was like the Swedish guy. I can't think of his. I can't think of his name. They didn't even say like, were you a Lutheran? They would say, are you a And there was,
you mean Jan Hus?
It might have been. It was
Hungarian. Yeah.
There was a bunch of guys that did it, and they eventually messed with a guy that Luther made an alliance with a dude with an army, and it played out different.
The other takeaway from
and
this,
the printing press. But sorry, go ahead.
No, you're the other takeaway from this, something that you guys both alluded to earlier. By virtue of the way it's composed, an oligarchy doesn't really have breaks. Like you can have, if you've ever been in a meeting, you understand this concept. You can have 10 people sit down together, and if nobody's clearly in charge, you can't really put a stop to things that you say, we need to slow this down. You're going too far. This is going to cause us backlash. There is no process for that. When they killed Caesar, it was a big conspiracy, but not everybody was involved in it, and not everybody agreed with it. Even people who hated Caesar, some of them thought it was correctly thought it was a terrible idea. But an oligarchy can't do that. That's like the biggest pitfall of that model of government, is that since there's no accountability, there's no way to tamp down on excessive behavior. Like, you can look back, and I think this is this was actually something that a lot of people have thought about. The liberators or whatever would have loved the deal that they were going to get from Caesar, if they could have seen that a year before they all got their heads cut off. Like, they would have, we could just have a little bit of land reform. We could have stayed in power. We could have all of our lands. We'd all still be alive. Our kids would be alive. Yeah, you would have thought that, that was a great deal. We must have been crazy. But at the time, there's nobody in charge. There's nobody who's going to have to answer for things as an individual leader.
Yeah, it's a runaway social construct. It just has a mind of its own.
This is one of in terms of describing it, social psychology, one of their great contributions over the last 100 years is the concept of groupthink. I've read that the Pearl Harbor attack was by the Japanese was conceived during a period of this groupthink. The best example I could think of is read about the group surrounding Pompey, urging Pompey on, and then read the dictionary definition of groupthink, which is it's fantastic. Groupthink is a psychological phenomenon that occurs within a group of people in which the desire for harmony or conformity in the group results in irrational or dysfunctional decision-making outcome. This is like everyone should read Plutarch, but to read Plutarch about all the guys around Pompey, sort of, this is like a weird human thing that humans just sort of get out from our own brains. None of these people would have made these decisions on their own, but it's just this funny. It's like the tulip mania or something. We just do this. That's just what humans do. We're just crazy like that.
Yeah, we touched on this in one of our last recordings. We were talking about the structure. There's a diffusion of responsibility and a diffusion of leadership in both corporations and in like governments like this, and that just no single person is in charge, and that has benefits like limited liability, but it also has drawbacks that things can affect that system in a way that you then can't do anything about it. You can't stop it. Yeah.
Purity spiraling. I also read that the Bay of Pigs disaster, and you could see that. I mean, if you were in that room and you said, well, I don't think this would be a good idea. It's like, well, everybody else is there. Is like, oh, what are you, a communist? Like, or, it's obvious how that would play out. I don't know. If anybody has any more questions about the trial, we're prepared to face that. We're in a weird situation because we had planned this. We're going to be talking about a different subject now, which is not breaking news. But we're not running away from it or anything. But if that's all you wanted to hear about, well, you go ahead and click off because we're not going to be talking. We're going to be talking about a different subject.
But you shouldn't, because the subject we're going to talk about is far more interesting than the trial stuff. I mean, let's be honest. The interesting stuff's all going to happen in November. Really, yeah. The Rubicon is crossed now. It's over. It happened.
The Rubicon crossed him, man.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do now? Maybe Erik Prince will be the president.
Yeah. Look, you could have gotten this advice from GOB months ago, Mr. Trump. You need to get Erik Prince on your side. You can't quote laws to men with swords.
By the way, one of the reasons why I there's like a short list of things that I think that you need to work for President Trump right now, and like one of them, unfortunately, is billions of dollars. Because if you don't have enough, like essentially infinite money for you and your offspring, you're not going to be able to make correct decisions working for this guy, because DC is going to make life very hard for you afterwards. Now, if you're a billionaire, doesn't matter, which Erik Prince counts himself in that club. I've heard that an Indian guy is super rich, which that immediately was like, hey, sounds great. Good. Yeah. Super rich. Okay, good. Cause you're going to need it. Cause they're going to make you pay if you work for this guy. But, anyways, how does this story begin?
By the way, guys, did you see that thing? I've been offline all day except for this morning, and I happened to see a New Republic thing about a group chat leak from Erik Prince's Discord. Did y'all see that?
No, what?
Oh my God! Well, if you are conservative, do never discuss anything on Discord. It is the most wide open service on the planet Earth. How is this? He sells a phone that's a privacy machine. What happened?
Do you guys know Ken Silverstein, who that is? He wrote, like, back in the 90s, Washington Babylon with Alexander Coburn. And I don't know, he's kind of had some run-ins with our side of Twitter before. But anyway, I follow him. And apparently he got these group chat leaks and from Discord. And he's pro-Democrat or whatever, so it's in the New Republic. But I thought to the extent that I said anything about it, it's full of, how should I say, RVs and foreigners who are insane about trying to get America to attack Iran and just blow up the Middle East and blah, 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 blah. And there's other guys in there that are more legacy Americans that are, and actual veterans who are like, that's not a very good idea. And then the RVs call them pussies and traitors. And it's, anyway, I saw some things that were kind of familiar in there, but I don't know about the fallout. I was online for a brief bit and I saw that and then I had to go. So I don't know how it shook out.
My theory on this, what we need to do, what's going to happen is, like, as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, you could play Metal Gear Solid, watch Ronin. There's a million pieces, great pieces of media that are about all the people that lost their job as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed. Because if you're in the business of violence or making bombs or shit like that, we don't need bombs anymore. The Soviet Union's over. There's a lot of people. I don't think any of these people actually want to have a active war with Iran. I'm sure they'd love to do some more bombing and stuff, maybe Stuxnet or whatever. But they need, like, if they're not able to cite Iran as a defensive concern, because Iran has a real military, they have real technology and stuff. They're gonna afraid they lose their job. It needs to be like this fantasy that's out of reach for them. forever. I hope. I hope that's the thing.
I'm sorry. I gotta read one of the excerpts from this New Republic article about the Discord, the Discord
By the
DM
way,
link.
I cannot imagine Erik Prince, because I every now and then there's some kind of service you need that you have to go to Discord. I haven't done this in like a year or two. They're like, oh, you got to go on Discord to download the thing or whatever. When you turn on Discord, it treats you like you're 5 years old. There's all these like goofy ass pop-ups and like, wow, gamer, welcome to the new, you know, there's all this stupid bullshit. Like it doesn't treat you like a professional at all. It's like, oh, you're 5 years old. Welcome to the Discord world. I cannot imagine a guy like that, you know, in a smoking jacket with billions of dollars, using that app. What the hell, man?
So this wasn't actually from Discord. This is from a WhatsApp group chat. So this makes more sense. However, it would have been funnier if it was. I almost hate fact checking that because,
you know, they have a button that like you push this button, it'll tell your friends that you're playing Xbox and shit like that.
Yeah. Okay, so there's there's a list of the group's hottest topics. One is just the Biden regime, which they don't like that term. Israel, Palestine, the Houthi rebels, Iran, you know, all the stuff that HTML said. But here's the bullet point that I liked. The shortcomings of democracy that invariably resulted from extending the franchise to ordinary citizens who are easily manipulated by Marxists and populists. Quote, the West is at best a beautiful cemetery, end quote, lamented Sven von Storch, whose aristocratic German family fled the country after World War II to Chile, where their son was raised before returning to the land of his ancestors, where he married the granddaughter of the Third Reich's last de facto head of state, who was convicted in Nuremberg. Was that Donitz? Was he connected to Nuremberg? I can't. Yeah. So.
That is not where I thought that was going. Holy crap.
He's got the voice of Brazil blowing up his WhatsApp. Sorry, I don't have anything to contribute to that. I thought that was pretty funny. That's, this is, any kind of group chat that you're in will be infiltrated no matter how small or petty, and people will, dox the participants. They will post stuff and get people in trouble, try to get them fired. Everybody should have learned that in like 2016. Really? There's no excuse for this. I mean, we know how these group chats work. Erik Prince might have been in the group chat and never said a word or never saw it, and you just had a bunch of like famous people, military industrial guys, Senate staffers, blah blah blah, and they're all, you know, Fed posting like crazy. It probably doesn't mean a lot, but you know, it doesn't take much to get you fired from your job, so be careful out there. Don't get fired.
That is one of my favorite parts about the war, post-war history is like Donitz is like Donitz was sort of like being this used car salesman to like every country in the world, like coming up with all this bullshit, trying to like postpone meetings and stuff, because like the longer he could sort of stay on paper in power over the state, which was gone, he was getting more and more people. Like it was basically just to get more and more people not hung by the Soviets. You know what I mean? Get them on. Yeah. Getting people to Brazil, basically.
I guess everybody's seen the Mitchell and Webb skit about Donitz and Mitchell's Donitz, and he gets the news, and the room is literally falling apart all around him, and he wants to call his mom and tell his mom he's the Fuhrer now, and the phone stops working.
Whips out a folder with all his big ideas, trying to turn the war around.
Yeah, right.
Please just call Eisenhower and surrender. That's what.
I would say he was obviously much. I mean, to me, he was obviously much more intelligent than Himmler, because like he knew what he was doing. Like every second that he wasn't talking to the West, he was buying time to get more people out of what would be the Red Army. Whereas Himmler was like he showed up to whoever found him, whatever they found him in a pharma thing. He was like, okay, he set this deal. He's like, if I show them this deal, the Americans will make me the Fuhrer, and they'll set us against the Soviet Union. And this will be great for everybody. It'll be great for everybody. He was like, he's acting like, this would be the art of the deal. The art of the deal. He thought like, I don't know. It was pretty funny.
Sounds like an amphetamine fed idea.
Many such cases.
Many such cases.
Well,
also a case of someone thinking they're indestructible, just like Trump.
Yes, unfortunately. So we didn't bring our chief correspondent and the esteemed scholar up here just to talk about the Trump trial. Let's get to the thing that we originally scheduled this about. Would you like to talk about the inciting incident, this new change in policy that prompted the discussion?
Yeah. So we got to start by talking about NAGPRA and like what it is, like originally, because these are changes to the law, and this was a law that was passed in Congress in like 1992. Do you mind if I share my screen? I can do it myself. I just want to make sure that's okay.
That's really more of a risk for you than for us.
No, yeah, I'm going to share tabs here. I'm not stupid. I'm not using Discord to Fed post. So I'm going to share a couple of things, but first I'm going to start with my thread. And I just wrote a quick thread on this. Now, the NAGPRA it's the Native American Graves Protection Protections. I'm sorry. It's the Native American Protections and Graves Repatriation Act. So the intention here was good, which is that, see, I'm sharing something I shouldn't. I'm always sharing this little thing here, just making sure there wasn't anything here I needed to really hide. But this is like the original intent of the law was to stop all of the grave robbing, the very real grave robbing that had happened. Like literally, it's famous that George Bush's grandfather, I don't remember if it's HW or W, his grandfather, so one of their grandfathers, or great-grandfather, stole the head of Geronimo, who's like a famous Comanche or Apache warrior. And so there was reasons for this, because these artifacts, not artifacts, but grave goods, like these graves are being robbed. Native American graves are being found, and the stuff inside them is being looted. And that law comes into effect in the 1990s. And that law was fine. It was needed, because it's not cool to rob graves. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. If you don't, like, whatever. But I feel that way. But these new changes are very different, and it's been altered a number of times. But remember, originally this was actually like put into law. So this was an act, and I wish we had Frito here, because I don't understand how this can happen, because like this act had to be voted on in Congress and was passed, but now I guess they're allowed to change a few rules on it, but this completely changes the law from its original intent. And I'm going to talk about the specifics of why. So I'm going to share this other tab. So
I mean, that's what's at the heart of all these these arguments about the Chevron exception and stuff like that. It's that these bodies that were supposed to exist as regulatory bodies to just make sure that the laws are being enforced were granted power to change the interpretations of the laws and effectively govern by themselves. And the real answer to this is Congress won't stop them, and Biden thinks it's good, so they're just going to get away with it. Like, obviously, this is extremely. If you are still a constitutional respecter, this is extremely illegal, but it doesn't matter.
And I guess their idea is that it doesn't change the original intent of the law, but it obviously does. And I'm going to talk about like what it extends to, because it really is crazy how far they're going. But this is being done not even by like an executive order from the president. It's being done under the Secretary of the Interior, one of the cabinet members. Okay, so there's a number of things here. So the new rules.
Go
ahead.
second. So we've never done super chat. So this is being restreamed on your channel. You got super chats going. I just want to step in. So we'll respect the I don't know what you call it, the etiquette posting, and I don't know. We'll check back in like 25 minutes or whatever, and read some super chats and check back out. But this isn't like your typical stream where that we do live reactions to super chats.
I was really confused when it came up on the screen. I was like, that's from me. How did that get on the screen? I was like, I don't know if you saw me. I was like going frantically in the different tabs, like what is happening? And then I figured out that you guys did it. But yeah, obviously you don't have to donate money, but if you want to, it's there, and that's very much appreciated. So these new rules of NAGPRA, and this is an opinion. This is an article. So this is just saying that the new rules depart completely from the Act's original intent, which was to provide for the protection of Native American graves and to address the rights of all this stuff. Okay, and this was the original intent. And that's fine, but this is not the original intent because it includes way more stuff. I'm gonna get to that one second. Sorry, I'm long-winded always. So it was enacted to repatriate human remains, right? That's very clear, and to their modern descendants, and descendancy, also referred to as lineal descent and cultural affiliation, was determined through a preponderance of the evidence. So this is done 50% or more. It's civil court rules, not criminal court. And they would use data. This was done in conjunction of, and I think this rule change came later. Originally, it was all data and all from like the archaeologists and the academic experts. But then also, or maybe it was original, is that also oral arguments are considered. Oral traditions and Native American ideas were considered. But somebody like, I don't know, a third party, somebody else got to look at all the evidence and decide, okay, who is the most right? And in most cases, if it's there's a few famous that I won't get into times when it doesn't go in favor of the Native Americans. But if it is like, sometimes it's on the edge, they don't know like where the goods or possibly the remains come from, but most of the time they're just giving this stuff back. And like if it's grave goods, if it's found in conjunction with human remains that are Native American, like they're going to give it back. But now, and this says here, 91% of them have been returned. But now, museums and federal agencies must defer, and this is a quote from the regulation itself, changed, which was originally an act of law passed in Congress, but since then, it is now being changed by an act of the opinion of an appointed, not even an elected official. Museums and federal agencies must defer to the Native American traditional knowledge of lineal descents, Indian tribes, and Native Hawaiian organizations. So, I mean, they must defer. And in this case, defer just means that the Native Americans get 100% say, right? So that's what that means in this case, because previously oral traditions have been given the same weight as scientific and historical evidence, but now it just trumps it. So now if the Native American representative says, you can't have this, and we're going to go into the specifics of like what it is. There's a lot to go over here. It's a whole bunch of BS. Then they're not allowed to do it. They're not allowed to do it if it involves Native American funerary objects, but also now it's cultural objects. So here's the other thing. Okay. Yeah, that's the kicker. It's also, they're expanding this to cultural objects. So it's including but not limited. This is the idea of the Native American traditional knowledge. This is the definition that is covered in the new regulation or the new law. It's a law. It's not just a regulation, covering a wide variety of information, including but not limited to, which is another key word here, cultural, ecological, linguistic, religious, scientific, societal, spiritual, and technical knowledge. Further, Native American traditional knowledge is not required to be developed, sustained, and passed through time. So all that's to say, like this is from the act itself. So the Native American representative gets to decide. It trumps historical and scientific evidence, and it's including but not limited to these criterias, and there's no oversight, and they get the last say. And it doesn't matter if there's no oversight. Like, it doesn't matter if it's passed through time. This can be the whim of an individual. I mean, this would be insane in any situation, But in this case, it's crazy. So, yeah, do you guys have anything to say, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, I just want to say, obviously, cultural artifacts could be extended to include literally everything in a museum that covers Native Americans, whatever. But I want to just compare and contrast. 2 years ago, General A.P. Hill's dead body was dug up out of the ground, and his grave literally desecrated, and his body moved in an act of iconoclasm. Obviously, they stole the statue of Robert E. Lee, and instead of giving it to anybody who actually wanted it, they gave it to a museum of NGO creatures who melted it down out of spite. Obviously, these rules don't apply to you if you're an enemy of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, this is only for Native Americans. It doesn't
Right,
protect anything else.
I'm just saying that in essence, you like the idea of cultural patrimony is evil if you are descended from people who from the Virginia colony, or Massachusetts Bay Colony, or whatever. Certainly, if you were, my goodness, part of the Confederacy, you do not have any rights to cultural patrimony. But here, if the medicine man says that the island is on a turtle's shell, then that's the truth. Then you have to. It has the binding force of law behind it. Correct?
Yes, we do live on Turtle Island, and if you don't say that, then you are a racist, and your statue will be burned down. Yes. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It gets worse. It gets way worse. Like, this is insane, what's going on here. So, okay. So the regulatory changes will affect museum displays and the management of museum collections. The new section, Duty of Care, states that museums must incorporate and accommodate the Native American traditional knowledge in the storage, treatment, or handling of cultural items. Cultural items. We're going to go into more detail on that. And museums must obtain free, prior, and informed consent prior to allowing exhibition of cultural items. And there's a dot, there's ellipsis, there's other stuff in there. But this part is key as well. Museums must obtain free, prior, and informed. So they have to go to the Native Americans beforehand. They have to get everything pre-approved to display it now. Okay, so curators need to consent with lineal descendants, Indian tribes, or Native Hawaiian organizations on the appropriate storage, treatment, or handling of human remains or cultural items. And we're going to get into as well, this is also really bad, who these representatives are or will be. And I've got that pulled up in another tab. And just so we're clear here, the Society for American Anthropology, which is the largest archaeology, rather. It's the largest archaeology group in the United States. This is like the gold standard. It's not some random ass group. And also archaeology and anthropology being one of the most woke fields. Like there have been studies that are surveys that they've taken of college professors, and there was one that did 12 colleges, and there was 0 Republican anthropology professors. There was 0. And they are expressing concerns that these changes could reach too far into museums' collections management process. And so a little bit lower down here, it's explaining like what is like culturally significant. And this might seem like they're going for a stretch, but some objects will be deemed too spiritually powerful to display.
So you can't have the Ark of the Covenant out; it would be too dangerous.
Yeah, but
that's already happened.
Ass.
Yeah,
sorry.
Wait, that already happened. What?
They've already literally covered up exhibits in museums because the object was deemed too spiritually powerful or whatever to be seen by the public.
Nuzak elders warn that the whistle could be used as a summoning tool for supernatural beings. Okay, that's kind of based. Okay.
Well, this is the thing: is that like, okay, so when we're thinking about religion, and I've talked about religion so many times before on Illegitimate Scholar, but we're not on Illegitimate Scholar right now. The religion being compartmentalized away from everyday life is something that is pretty new. So these justifications of oh, what's a spiritual object? For us, we think of that as like, oh, it's not being used at church, so it's not religious. But for most of human history, I mean, I'm talking about up till 1500 AD, your daily life is tied in with religion, and in most parts of the world, even today. So, like, this is the thing: the whistle to summon supernatural being. Like, this is a normal part of everyday life. There's going to be rituals and cultural significance associated with something as simple as hunting, which for us, I mean, maybe it's spiritual in a certain sense, but they could consider these objects to be sacred, like basically anything. And again, there's no oversight. There's no oversight at all. And they get last say, and essentially only say, because they need to get free and prior consent. The idea that they're taking, academic and sources, like actual scientific and historical evidence into consideration, I mean, it's just, it's a lie at this point. It might still technically be in there, but that information is entirely trumped by whatever the Native American representative says. So it doesn't matter.
Let me read this sentence from the article here that really caught my eye. In other instances, absurd narratives such as those found in the Northwest Coast Hall, which is a part of the Natural History Museum, right? It's American Museum of Natural History, right? That objects have spirits, so literally animism. This will be taught as a fact to children. Yeah. And that Native Americans come from supernatural animals, and that shaman's mask contains powers that one should fear. Now, the last two are funny, whatever. I'm not going to get to Harry Potter, D&D, whatever. Actually, teaching people that as a fact that objects have spirits is that's kind of crossed the line. You can't really teach animism as a scientific fact in a I mean, you can, obviously.
Now you have to.
Yeah.
If they tell you to, is the thing.
Does the science say that this is what these people believed, or does it say this is this is an object that contains the spirit of the universe?
You know what? If you were to go back 200 years ago, there'd be one place in the entire world where people would have said, "That's ridiculous. That's stupid. You're superstitious. You're an idiot." And that would be Anglo Protestant people would have said, you don't have magic objects. They would have said, the church claims they have the true cross, but they have you could build 400 crosses with all the different wood. They say, George Washington, Bolero, George Washington, Andrew Jackson, none of these people would have been like, "Oh, you've got the magic rock," or whatever. We have to be careful. I think of who in this way we would be much like the Romans, who the Israelites told Pompey, "You can't go in the Holy of Holies because it's magic and you'll be struck by lightning." And Pompey said, "Look, I'm not against you guys' religion, but I need to go in there to see if you ain't got any gold. And I'll be fine. I'm not worried about being struck by lightning. Just back off." This is most of the people in the world do think objects have magic powers.
No, well, hold on. No, most of the people in the world are not animists. No,
but most people in the world do believe that objects can be magic.
Religions have animistic properties, even if they're not explicitly animistic.
Right. And that's what I said. That there are things that have objects can be cursed or whatever. That's just kind of funny. And yeah, people do think that. But the first thing specifically, being told that objects have spirits, that is a capital R religious claim. That is that's a pagan belief.
Yeah. Look, I'm a dirty Mick Catholic, okay? So I actually do believe in the power of these objects. I do believe in that, but I absolutely do not believe that this should be taught in a museum at all. I don't, without the proper context. That's insane. It's absolutely insane. That's not the place for it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying is that, so, I mean, even among Christians, it's basically just Protestants, just Anglo-Protestants who We're the only people who do that. Everyone else, they have relics, they have stuff. But America, the only reason why I'm bringing this up, it's not ever religious debate. It's that, well, this is America. You know, the guys that wrote the books and stuff, they were a very specific people from a very specific part of the world that had very specific ideas about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the seed of Albany.
I don't want to belabor this point, but it is an important distinction. Please understand that if you're listening to this, that's not the same thing as like this item was blessed by Saint whatever Eusebius and it does things, or the Shroud of Turin because it was touched by God's Son. This is that the Brave Little Toaster was a documentary. Every object has its own soul. The rocks and the trees and everything are like their own individual spiritual entity, and that is yes. Animism, and it's.
Well, I'm really glad you said that because sorry, Bog Beef, go ahead.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in terms of like, if I was like a staunch like European Catholic, like I would definitely expect there be like legal protections of like church relics and stuff. That would be totally normal. Yes. And it's not that I think that you know that like I don't know what relics they have, but it's not like that I think that they would, you know, talk to me or something like that. But it would still be like, this is literally sacred. Like in terms of like, you should be arrested if you mess with it, stuff like that. Whereas, and by the way, you know, the people that came here from England, they had their own stuff. Like, you know, like they thought like if you couldn't read and couldn't read well, you were going to go to hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
People in Europe, they didn't believe that. They didn't believe that. These people from this one specific place, they had this sort of certain specific set of ideas, and and they don't run America anymore.
So yes. Yeah. I think one distinction I want to make here, just for not even like disagreeing with you, but about animism. And not all the Native Americans were animistic, but the ones in my area were the Pequot. They were animistic. And usually in animism, it's like midichlorians, right? It's energy that's in everything. And sometimes that's just living beings, but most of the time it's also inanimate objects. Like rocks have energy, and they're and this is an animistic belief. You have like types of animism and types of shamans that exist in other religions, like a Catholic priest performing an exorcism. You have certain objects. You have Santeria where there are shamans. But the key thing for this is that in a lot of these very animistic, explicitly not having animistic properties, but being animistic, Native American beliefs, it's all objects. It's everything. Everything is religious, and this is why I think it's so ridiculous to for another example, for individuals rather than for objects themselves. Like, you know, we have these stories that are often in mainstream modern anthropology. They're often like attacked as being like, oh, they're racist. All these different people, they go to these different places, and the Native American or the native people of those places, they obviously didn't actually think they were gods. It's like, no, dude, they did. Well, the idea of them being gods isn't what it is. It's that they were people of spiritual significance. A tribe, a chiefdom, a chief of a chiefdom is going to be somebody who would be comparable to somebody like Captain Cook showing up on the shores. So it's not out of the question, because it's very common. These are people with multiple gods. If they have gods, there are multiple gods. It's polytheistic. They're people that apply spiritual significance to absolutely everything. But in our case, what that means is that because, and again, this doesn't really matter because the Native American representative can make up whatever justification they have. I mean, I've showed that just in these excerpts here. They can make up whatever justification they have. But by their own criteria, it will cover basically everything if they want it to. And in practice, they won't cover up everything because it's going to depend on like who the individual is and who the tribe is and what they want displayed and what they don't. But they can cover up literally everything and make it so that nothing associated with a Native American can ever be displayed. They can do that. They absolutely can. They're not going to, but they can.
I think part of what you're getting at is there's also an element of translation here, and this gets weird when we start talking about laws, right? Because like you could think of something like for America, like If somebody told me at my house, I've got a little display case, and inside that display case, I have it air conditioned and controlled, and inside there rests the guitar that Jimi Hendrix played at Woodstock in 1969.
That's a sacred object.
Number one, I would think that's super badass. That is near enough to sacred to what, of course, it has nothing to do with it'd be like, oh, a 69 Charger or Dodge Charger or something. This does have a huge, this is like this even also has sort of effects on people. You can sort of look at the way Italians act about Ferraris and stuff like that. Americans, this guy in his truck, I have an antique truck built a certain kind of way. Now, my point here is that if you were one of these people, if they felt the same way about their thing like I felt about Jimi Hendrix guitar or whatever, they would just say, well, we, like, the law would describe that as a religious relationship. Mm-hmm. Whereas I would not consider that a religious relationship. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that, we can't get it would take me forever to talk about it, but it really comes down to, like, the compartmentalization, the academic definition of religion that has religious elements to it. Also, by the way, how did you get it out of the museum in Seattle? Because that's where that guitar is. I've seen it. It's awesome. But yeah, that is, even if you don't consider it religion, by the definitions in cultural anthropology of, like, what a religion is, that you can argue, and I would argue, a lot of people wouldn't, because that comes from the politics of, like, not caring about of number one, the compartmentalization of it, but also the, like, just not caring about things that are sacred to white people in general, just like the statues we were talking about. But that is religious. I mean, it is religious by this definition that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we if you've seen the Nicolas Cage documentary, we have copies of the Declaration of Independence that we treat as sacred objects. So that's not unusual. What makes this story and why we're talking about it is the patronage angle. If you just made these rules that you have to display the sacred names of every object, blah, 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 it wouldn't matter. What matters is it's not even the creation of these, what else can you call them? You're creating these clients. It's the self-creation. Like the Congress, whenever in the 90s, created this organization, and it's now legislating itself more power. And Congress is not going to stop them because Congress doesn't do that anymore. Yeah. And obviously, the presidency is now occupied by a cabal of morons who like this kind of stuff. So now the kids have the keys to the car, and they're going to hand back all the artifacts to whoever asked for them to take them to the casinos, whatever. Things can be removed from display. Artifacts in the possession of natural history museums run by the government are the property of all Americans, not just people who say, like, well, actually, our great grand tribe was here, so this belongs to us.
Yeah, it should be that way. Unfortunately, it's not.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the real issue here, once you go down into it, is about sovereignty and ownership. Historical, patrimony, cultural artifacts from white people are considered public domain, more or less. But now, with this escalation of NAGPRA, basically the Indians are sovereign over any artifact that they can say was theirs, and they effectively own it. They have taken it away from public ownership and brought it back into their own hands. And I don't know exactly what they do. Of course, the bones they rebury, and this was always a slippery part of NAGPRA from the beginning. I mean, I agree that NAGPRA was necessary because there was some evil shit done to the graves, and people want to read about the Spiro Mound and what they did to that. They blew it up with dynamite, and it was like a treasure trove. Some
Many
very
mounds have been destroyed, unfortunately.
well, yeah,
That
but I
helped.
mean, this one
Yeah.
was literally by a mining company that
Oh,
blew it up with dynamite, and that was the most. Spiro was like a combination of the Svalbard Seed Bank and Vatican City all in one. They were trying. That's a long story, but it's
that
so
breaks my heart, man. Really does.
it's so crazy what they did. So that law was necessary, but there was a slippery phrase in NAGPRA, associated grave goods. Well, there's bones everywhere. Literally anything could have been stretched to say any artifact could be said to be a grave good. There's, especially in my part of Arkansas, where the bones almost always dissolve because the soil is so acid. So the Native Americans could say that is actually a grave. So anything you find there is ours, even if there were no bones present. So that was always a slippery thing in NAGPRA. But now this is an escalation. It is patronage. The Secretary of the Interior is a Native
Wait.
American.
I'm sorry. I want to stop you because I want to get to that point. But yes, it's the patronage behind this is insane, and it's worse than you think. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Did you have anything else to say? I'm sorry to stop you in the middle, but I got an order I want to put this in.
No, go ahead.
Oh, do you have anything else besides that?
No.
Okay. So I want to first say how they're describing this, and then how this is actually being implemented. Right. So I've got two things. And first, it's an NPR article, and I'm sharing this to show how NPR is describing this. So this is an update to ceremonial objects. And this is the way they describe it: a staff covered in otter skin. Okay, a staff covered in otter skin used in a ceremony. I can get behind that. I still wish they did the whole law thing, but that's how they're describing the ceremonial objects, right? Or say a medicine bag from a shaman. And then this update, this is how they describe it. The update is extensive, but the key points are that it can't be displayed or used for research unless there is consultation and explicit permission from the tribe they belong to. That's one of the points, yes. And second, the burden is now on the museums to reach out to the tribes for their permission. It used to be the other way around. Yeah. And that's all they say. That's not all of it, but that's all they say. These are the main points. That's all they're claiming. And yeah, this is, someone being concerned here. The stories are lost to history, which is, it's a real problem.
Well, yeah, but that's important because I mean, like, imagine this. Okay, if someone was they were digging a power line or something like that in Norway, and they said, "Oh, we found a tomb," and they bumped into a tomb, and there was a stack of swords and armor in there. But just like these people, they don't know whose grave this was. None of these things were. They don't know who these people were. And look, you're not gonna and they found bones in there. Well, we don't need the bones. We're not going to put the bones in a museum unless they're unless they're like super strange or something. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the English bowman's bones they found, where it was obvious their bones were like, these guys were like mutating because of they were shooting bows so much. But if they found them swords, nobody would say like, oh, we can't show these. Who would you call to give them? I mean, it's not like there's not Norwegian people. There's Norwegian people just like there's Cherokee people, but you can't call the king of all Norwegian people. Ironically, they probably do have a king. But, you don't do that. You just say, oh, that's a cool sword. Let's take it out. Let's put it in a museum. We can study it. We can learn from it. But, like, these are the only people where, I mean, like, this isn't nobody's, like, grandfather's sword. Like, you don't know who these people are. It's like, well, we found a grave here. I don't know, man.
Let me make a prediction without knowing, just by the language of this. Now that the onus is on the museums to reach out to native experts, that means that you got to shell out money to consult to the tribes people, and you've had just created an entirely new class of patronage jobs that did not exist the day before. Is that correct?
It's so I don't actually know. They might be charging for this. I'm not sure. But it's I think it's worse than that. So I'm going to get to that now. Okay. So museums, like we've talked a lot about Native Americans, but like you obviously have to define, especially in a legal sense, who the Native Americans are that you're consulting, right? And they had touched on it a little bit, but this is only indigenous experts. And these experts must come from a recognized group. Okay, so that's and this is from the website. This is from the Department of the Interior website. So who may request Native American cultural items under NAGPRA? NAGPRA provides for requests by lineal descendants, Indian tribes, and Native Hawaiian organizations, and all this stuff about what that means. But really what's important is down here. NAGPRA does not require museums and federal agencies to consult with non-federally recognized Indian groups. So only Indian groups that are recognized by the federal government, which is, the most powerful ones, are able to do these requests. Okay, that's key. So in this up here describes it. An Indian tribe is any tribe, band, blah, 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 that is recognized as eligible for the special. So this is who the recognized tribes are, or this is how they're legally defining an Indian tribe.
Oh, I get it now.
As recognized as eligible for the special programs and services. So it's only federally recognized tribes.
Okay, I get it. So because
and it gets worse.
Because
it gets worse.
Proof is defined as, we believe that we're descended from Aeneas, so actually we're Romans or Trojan. If you're one of these federally recognized tribes, you can say, oh yeah, the people who crossed the Bering Strait 15,000 years ago, that's our ancestors, so we should have control over whatever artifacts you find, even though they're not the same people at all.
Well,
that was a part of a hugely contentious thing in the early 90s
Yes.
with Kennewick Man. They found the bones up there in Washington of someone who died, 10,000, 12,000 years, and they looked different than, skull morphology or whatever. And so people thought, well, okay, there's different theories about Bering Strait and different waves of people coming over, and this person might have been racially different and blah, blah, blah. And the Indians were just infuriated by that. They wanted to, claim that he was a direct ancestor. Anyway, they eventually did prove that, that he was an ancestor, but to which tribe? That was 10,000 years ago. There, at some point, there is very little cultural continuity. It would be like me descended from, people from the United Kingdom, and then saying definitely I should have sovereignty over Viking artifacts found in Scotland. I mean, can I plausibly say that I'm descended from Viking immigrants to the United Kingdom? Maybe, but still, that's kind of tenuous for me to just claim that that's my people, and therefore I should be able to basically have sovereignty over all the patrimony from those people so far in the distant past.
Yeah.
The other
and with
thing-
Kennewick Man, it was obvious. Oh, like with Kennewick Man, they originally the evidence showed we can't tie it to any specific tribe. This was, I think, in Washington State, where there's a bunch of federally recognized tribes. It's very, very dense with native tribes. And in that case, eventually, once they did new methods came out, and they did DNA on the bones, and they were related to, and they found descendants, I think, or at least people related genetically. But now that doesn't even matter, because, and this is another really bad thing about this, they get to decide the criteria for what it is. So it's anything in the ground prior to 1500, but they get to decide what that, how the, what the justification is. So now they can just, they can grab whatever from the ground. It gives them sovereignty. And I'm going to tell you who them is in a second. It gives them sovereignty in control over anything you find in the ground, basically. Yeah. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic here.
Now, part of it, it doesn't even matter who them is beforehand, because as soon as you sign the law and you declare, like if this law said that Bog Beef gets to decide, well, the day after this law is signed, you need to keep an eye on Bog Beef, because he's going to have a lot of really, really bad incentives to open up gas stations right across the border where they sell cigarettes with no taxes. But I don't know, man. This is it's the amount of, because you could. Well, here's what I would say. Just look at the track record, right? So we talk about this with the churches, right? So there's this thing where you see all the time on Twitter, they have this theological debate where these churches will be like, we should open up our clergy to women and LGBT or something. And they'll get into the Bible based on their specific denomination, whatever. However, you could just save yourself time and there's 10 churches that have done this right before you. And so you could, and they all have sort of similar play out what this looks like. Now you could take a look at this situation and okay, what actually results from these sorts of conversations, these sorts of laws, these precedents being signed? Well, we have people that are very similar to people who started the United States. We have Canada and we have Australia. And if you look at any type of legislation written about these issues, where it's headed, I mean, I was talking about this earlier today. If you want to read the most absurd document you've ever seen, look at the Green Party platform in Canada from the last one I read. It's absurd. It's completely insane. And it says they took some other party the whatever their liberal party is, and they just went line for line and put the end of it and put Native Americans in charge of it. It's we'll ban abortion, or we'll have free health care, and we'll put Native Americans in charge of it. We'll do this, we'll do that, but it's completely absurd. And of course, you can go look at Australia, and you also have this thing in Canada. But what you end up having is when they bring out the guy from the tribe, they don't look very tribal. One of my best friends in high school, he went to my church. Family went to my church. We hunted and fished together. He acted just like any other person that you've ever met. He had a little bit darker skin, and his dad was the chief. But he was just a regular white guy. They didn't have a federally recognized tribe. He was obviously super Indian. But he was just a guy. His family had assimilated. There was just no difference between them than you or I.
Yeah. And it is like that in a lot of cases. And blood quantum, which is the calculation of how Native ethnically you are, is a huge issue for Native Americans today. A lot of very different opinions on it. There's a good and they're they do a pretty good job. I forget what the YouTube channel is, where they bring people with different opinions together and people with the same characteristic, and they see if they agree or don't agree. And this is a contentious issue for contemporary Native Americans, is how much blood, or if blood matters at all. Especially because there was a lot of things that happened, some forcefully, unfortunately, with relations between white people and Native Americans, but a lot of it, and you don't know, but a lot of it also just regular old just mixing.
Yeah, but now you're white. It's almost oh, okay, these other people came in and they did this stuff. Well, that's you. That in many cases, that's more of them than is the Native American. They just want to cast off the white part because it's it's politically inconvenient in today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
right. No.
Yeah. These racist, these rapist white guys came in there. Well, you look in the mirror, because now that is in fact you. It's not it's not that let's say that their great ancestor was a beautiful, Indian priest, chief lady or whatever, and some nasty ass guy came in from the east and raped him and stuff like that. And now that's their ancestor. Well, they act that part of them that was the white person, didn't have a soul. That doesn't exist, and that part is not part of them anymore. Well, you are that rapist now because of that. You
It's
can't
the same thing with
that.
the conquistadors and like Cubans and Puerto Ricans, especially when it's like, it's 80-90% white. There's the cultural aspect, right? The cultural continuity of it, and also the fact, Native American tribe. I'm not going to get too far. I always talk about the contemporary Native American stuff when it gets brought up, but for being concise, I won't rant here. But yeah, you make a good argument, and that. Of course, the answer is, they get benefits for being Native American and they get hit on for being white. So, and it's the same thing with Hispanics that don't assimilate to white. And instead they're like, you get a Hispanic guy who is Hispanic, but is majority Spaniard. And then they're like, oh, I'm Hispanic, I'm a person of color. And then they're like blaming a third generation Irish guy like me, for this stuff. Not that they should blame other white people, because it's still your ancestors. It's not you. But that doesn't seem to matter. None of that seems to matter.
No, there was a story recently from Ireland where there were migrants who were, protesting the Irish government because of colonialism, which, Ireland didn't colonize anybody. Ireland was colonized. So, but
the plantations in the South were based on the plantations in Ireland, by the way.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, it's all fake. They're little games, status games that you play, and right now, saying that you are part of the out group, it makes you higher status. This is what happens, and it's not just saying that; it is true. So, for example, if, as our boy Dr. Montalban pointed out, if all of your cultural patrimony in the place that you live is considered, well, not just a public good belonging to everybody, but like literally can be handed over to people who don't like you to be destroyed, you are definitionally a second-class citizen. When other people have personal control over things that are related to their ancestors and you don't, and your stuff belongs to them, you are now a second-class citizen. This is a very important thing. It's like everything else in America. If you played by these rules universally, it would be weird and worse than what we had, but it would, you could deal with that because okay, I guess now that I'm the Pope of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and I get to decide, what happens to all those statues and stuff. Well, that's not the way to do it, but that would be understandable. No, that's not what we have. What we have is the chief gets to decide not only the stuff that belonged to his tribe, but pretty much any native person that lived, not even pre-Columbian, forever. Even if they weren't related to him, really, he gets to say who controls that. Whereas you don't even get to stop them from digging up your dead great grandfather, and that's where we are.
It's kind of a reversal, of what it was in the past against Native Americans. Not that justifies it, but it is somewhat of a reversal of that. And that reminds me of like one thing that's a good segue. You saying that. These tribes have to be federally recognized, right? I was talking about that before. They have to be federally recognized to get this protection. And the federally recognized tribes are generally the ones that were most powerful at the time, and I'm saying this in general, and I'll use a specific example as well, at the time of European colonization. So in my case, in Connecticut, I've done a lot of excavation and research on, I've done excavation on a bunch of Algonquin sites, the indigenous people in New England, right? But there were like 20 distinct tribes, probably more, but like there were 20 or so, 20, 25, 30 recognized by the English settlers. But all of them were in a tribute system under the Pequot. And the Pequot there's now three groups of Pequot because they were split up, partly by force of European colonization, but also because they were in the process of diffusing. It's an anthropological term, diffusing, or maybe that's not the right one, but into two different groups of Pequot. So the Pequot, Connecticut, the state, Connecticut, gets its shape from the territory that the Pequot, who were fought against in this war called the Pequot War in 1637, that they controlled. And this, only a tiny fraction of this, actually where I'm from, is where the Pequot actually lived. But their tributary system extended almost to the Hudson River. And almost to Rhode Island, but in Rhode Island it's the Narragansett. That's why there's Connecticut, and Rhode Island is separate. That's why you have that tiny little crappy state on the coast, because their mortal enemies, the Narragansett, lived there, and still do. So it's a federally recognized tribe, right? But what that means is that there are all these other tribes, and this is repeated everywhere across the country. The most powerful tribes get the federal recognition. They're the ones who had the power and the strength and the numbers to retain the records that allowed them to become federally recognized in the first place. So that means that these federally recognized groups are now having dominion over objects and ultimate dominion over objects that may or may not be related to their tribe and could potentially be related to a tribe that that tribe themselves had subjugated and, done horrible things to. And there's an example of this in New Zealand with their indigenous people. There's the Maori. People know about the Maori. I don't know about everybody, but a lot of people know about the Maori. And they were across most of New Zealand. But there's this group called the Moriori. And the origins of them are a little unclear, but it seems like, and I'll tell you why the origins are unclear in a second, it seems like they split off from the Maori 200 years, give or take, quite a bit, because we don't really know. From the Maori, they moved to their own island, and they established there a law of peace. They were non-violent entirely. And Maori, by the way, and Polynesians in general, but Maori especially, are incredibly warlike. And I don't mean that in all natives are warlike, but in the context of other similar groups, they were extraordinarily warlike. So what happens is the Maori eventually, they know the Moriori are there. They don't have transportation to get there. So they commandeer a British ship and at gunpoint force the British sailors, these New Zealand sailors, to bring them to the island where the Moriori are, and they start slaughtering them and enslaving them. And they do that, and they really kill the numbers down. And eventually it's stopped after a really long time. But like the Moriori are peaceful. Their entire culture is no weapons at all. They're extraordinarily peaceful, likely as a reaction to the amount of wars and violence that's going on in actual New Zealand. That's speculation, but it seems like the best, explanation for this. But what has never happened is recognition of Moriori as an individual people. So the Moriori in New Zealand, they don't, I think they do now, but forever, they didn't have the same rights. And unfortunately, the Maori actually had dominion, had control over the Moriori's land. The Moriori are not recognized at all. So the Maori, the people that committed a literal genocide on them, are the ones that get to control them and enslaved them and brought them back. And that's the ones that are left, because the Maori destroyed their culture it would be judged by most Europeans except for the Belgians as cruel, right? Yeah, gotta bring that in there. King Leopold is a scumbag by anyone's standards, in a similar sense to the Maori being very violent in comparison to others. But here's the thing. Okay, so back to America. Federally recognized tribes, federally recognized nations. So museums can only display artifacts by indigenous experts. They must come from a recognized group. But who decides who is recognized? The Bureau of Indian Affairs, right? This is the group that decides. It's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is part of the federal government. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is controlled by the Department of Interior. The Department of Interior is the organization that made this change. So this executive branch, this bureau, in the executive branch, they decided that the groups that they recognize, so the groups that are recognized by the Department of the Interior through from the Department of the Department of the Interior changed the laws to decide that the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which recognizes certain tribes, they get to decide. Oh my God, I'm talking around in circles. You guys get what I'm saying. I want to say it in one fell swoop. But the Department of the Interior changed a law that gives control over all of the human history in the United States that isn't European or Afro-Caribbean or anything, under complete control of their own clients in the Bureau of Indian Affairs that are recognized by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And this is why I stopped you earlier, Doctor. I apologize. I wanted to get this out after I talked about a couple of other things. But yeah, this is what it is, man. So the Secretary of the Interior has given, there's a direct line from President Biden, if you believe that, to these artifacts. The executive branch has taken direct control over these tribes. It also gives them the opportunity, like, say whatever you want after this. I'm pretty much done. But like, just off the top of my head, when I think about this, it's like, they get to decide who they recognize in this group a lot of times. I mean, sometimes it's all like the tribe, they have their own government and that government gets to decide it. But I'm sure that there are ways that the Department of the Interior, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, if something is happening that they don't want, so not even that it's going to be done by ridiculous woke, Native Americans, because the people that are in these governments are not just like a regular Native American. They're the types of people that are going to be like, yeah, this shoe is sacred. There are probably ways that they can, quid pro quo, be like, hey, you know what? We're not going to show this because it's sacred, right? Like, either through threat of taking away certain funding or through, their own sort of bribery of patronage towards these people that will do their bidding. The executive branch has control over the human history in the United States now. They just do.
This is the essence of the administrative state. You have these departments of the executive that became not even self-contained. They're just they report to themselves. They functionally legislate. I think the EPA has done this forever. The only way to stop this behavior is either a person being elected president who has very, old-fashioned opinions about the constitutional order, or the Supreme Court explicitly destroys the administrative state, which I don't think that'll happen because only they have the guts to do that. I have a question for Dr. Montalban, though. So when we're talking about like Cahokia and other Mississippian places and artifacts, who gets control over them? Because those people are all I don't see how you could untie that knot.
I don't know about Cahokia, but I know the archaeologists claim that the Mississippian descendants are pretty much the historic tribes that occupied the same land more or less. So, they would say probably Cahokia and eastern Missouri would belong to the Osage. They say my part of Arkansas belongs to the Quapaw. Now, in some cases, there was direct continuity between the Western Mississippians and the Caddo. That's obviously the same people that underwent a cultural change. But the other stuff, they do it by tribal mythology, and then they compare that to what they can figure out from the Mississippian stuff. I don't think it's genetics yet determining the link. At least
they're never going to do it with genetics just because of the issues with blood quantum.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we know so if there were two recognized tribes who said both like, hey, my ancestors said this, and the other said my ancestors said that.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, right. They fight over it. And you're subject to the whim of whoever they've declared the successors of that historic area. From what I understand, I've been to Parkin, and that's a shame because it's not far from me. But I've heard that the artifacts displayed in Parkin and at Wilson are authentic still, because the Quapaw thinks the public deserves to see those artifacts. So all the cool head pots and stuff at Wilson, you can still see those, and those are real. However, and I don't know if this is true, But Moundville in Alabama is it's like one of the top 4 Mississippian sites. It's extremely important. It's a huge site. It has a fantastic museum. I have seen people say that literally every artifact in that museum now is a replica. All this stuff. And they had some incredible, they have these pallets that may be like an astrolabe, it may be a calendar. They have all these cool pots and stuff from there. And that's gone. I guess it went to the Creek Indians. That would be my guess, but I don't know for sure. So whatever local Native American museum, I guess on the state level, well, on federal level too, would go to the historic tribe from that area, even if they are in another area. Like, for instance, the Quapaw are actually headquartered in Oklahoma, all the way across the state and across the border from this part of Arkansas. But it just depends on what that specific tribe wants to do. And yes, there are, as far as I know, there are arguments between the recognized tribes over who gets what. And I believe I've read somewhere that they've determined a sharing arrangement in at least one example.
It's funny because if you genuinely cared about people learning more about your people, which if you're a tiny like the tiny rump of a demographic group that was almost extinguished, like that would be important. You want people to think and care about your fate, which has been wildly successful in the case of Native Americans. For pound, one of the most discussed groups in the United States. If you when you're schooled in history, I'm old compared to people listening to this podcast, but even when my education, the plight of the Indians was a huge part of our American history education. So this is counterproductive for that angle. You don't want to be taking the artifacts away from public view, because if you do that, the public will simply stop caring about it. And if you've been paying attention to what's happening in America and Europe, when people, including your own, stop caring about your culture and your history, you quickly can be erased.
Yeah.
In a blink of an eye, it can happen. So this is stupid, but
Yeah, it's very stupid. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's stupid, but this is all short term. Very few people are going to have the fortitude to say, well, no, I don't want the patronage job. I don't want to have this power. I want to have my I care more about the fate of my people and our history. Most human beings don't operate that way. That's why we end up in this situation.
So here's another problem that comes out of this, is that this, obviously we're talking about federally recognized tribes. That's one limitation, but then it's who the people are that are actually going to be deciding what is sacred and what's not. And I'm going to tell you a story about this. These types of people within these tribes, this is going to be the opinion of an individual or a group of individuals. And, I can't speak entirely broadly just because the diversity of Native Americans is huge. It's absolutely massive. It's like the amount of language families, which Indo-European is a language family, all the way from England to India, right? But there are dozens of language families in the United States. The cultures are extraordinarily, they're non-arbitrarily and unequivocally more diverse than, Europe or Asia, because they didn't have this centralization over thousands of years, at least in North America, to create one winning language family, basically. So the types of organizations that they have are going to be extraordinarily different. So who is going to be deciding this is going to be extraordinarily different. But in many of these cases, and I would expect that the type of person or group of people that's going to be deciding what is sacred, what isn't, they're going to be representatives from the most woke extreme of this group, of the Native American group that we're talking about. So unfortunately, that means in practice that it's going to be casting a wide net towards what is ceremonial and what's not. And one experience I had with an anthropology class when I was in my undergrad, we had our professor brought in a Native American woman to talk about the what was contemporary at the time, which was the Washington Redskins. And there was this Native American woman comes in. This is the woman who would be deciding this type of thing. That's her position in the tribe. And she was talking about how it should be changed. It definitely should be changed. And to her credit, she did talk about how, like, she showed a picture of her with, you know, another Native American guy, a younger guy about my age, who was wearing a Cleveland Indians hat, and he loved having that representation. And, you know, I personally, not that my opinion matters as a non-native, but like, I don't see the Cleveland Indian logo as great. I don't know if they should change it. I think they already did, but like, he personally saw that as a point of pride, and so he was wearing the hat as a Native American. But she did not feel that way. But then she shared with us more of this, right? She started telling us, like, oh, they should change the name. They should change the Washington Redskins, change all of these. And, you know, we're having a discussion. Most people in the class, it's anthropology, so everybody pretty much agrees with her. But then she goes a little bit further, and she starts talking about the other teams that should be changed. And she starts saying explicitly, and this was the end of the class, so we didn't get to talk about this anymore, but she starts saying that, you know, you got to get rid of the Chicago Bears because the bear is a sacred animal in a lot of tribes. And you got to get rid of the Ravens and the Eagles. You got to get rid of those. And she ended, the last thing she said to the class was that, like, oh yeah, the teams, maybe they should just be colors. That was her recommendation. And like, not only is that ridiculous, but it shows that, you know, these people, and in this case and in other cases, they don't care about what you think is important. So they don't care if somebody else really likes the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't care about that at all. They don't care if you like your football team. They don't care about football. They don't care about Robert E. Lee. They care about their own thing. Mm-hmm. And if you give them a position to just talk about what they think is most important and to control and give them control over things that other people think is important, they're just going to get rid of it. They don't care at all.
We used to tell people like this to shut up. That's what, you know, that's the main thing that needs to happen. I mean,
they
I'm
have
not
power now. You can't tell someone to shut up when they have power over you.
Yeah, I'm not trying to have a conversation with these. By the way, I mean, it would be funny to put on this act over like the Ole Miss Rebels. You know what I mean?
That's our word. Or yeah, or our boy here complaining about the Boston Celtics. It's harmful to his people.
I'm offended. You got to get rid of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It's not cool. I don't like us being a stereotype.
On that subject, just to show how mainstream that insanity is, soon after the Cleveland Indians changed their team name to the Guardians now, I can remember this. There was a op-ed in the Washington Post by some woke-tard, activist, demanding that the Texas Rangers change their name because the Rangers are, historically killed Indians and people of color, etc.
Innocent Comanches were slain by the Texas Rangers.
The Comanches being another one of those extraordinarily violent tribes, by the way.
This it just makes you feel like the world got a lot worse when people like Marge Schott died.
She was so cool.
It was the last stadium in America that you could get a hot dog for $2 at. All the other ones had gone to like $10 and stuff like that because she was this crazy old rich coot. She's like, I wouldn't pay $10 for a hot dog. We can't sell hot dogs for $10. That's crazy.
Bog, I can remember when that happened, and that was sort of like a proto-woke thing. She got canceled to the degree that people got canceled back then because she allegedly said slurs in private. But all her players loved her. Mm-hmm. Latin League Baseball made her sell the team. Who did she sell it to? Carl Lindner, whose family ran United Fruit Company for like decades in Latin America. But he didn't say slurs, so it was okay. Yeah. The libtards were fine with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because she was this crazy old lady. Like, and somebody asked her about Hitler one day, and because like, well, look, if you're just an average crazy person, by the way, you can just ask the person off the street about Hitler, and they'll tell you you don't know what they're going to say. They normally say weird stuff, but and, you know, she's like, oh, I like the guy's mustache. You know, she said something like that because you know what is she's not grappling with the legacy of this or that. She's just some crazy old lady. That's how normal people are. Yeah, and she treated their customers better than anyone else in America. And but because she don't like exactly like you said, she didn't have this sort of professional trained thing. I don't know. It just very much reminds me of when the Republican primary that Trump ran in. The biggest difference between him wasn't the like the Jeb Bush and Trump. It was the there was a lady who had spent her whole life in corporate America. I don't remember. You remember that she was worked for HP?
Yeah, I know you're talking about. She ran for president.
Yeah, and
Fiorina, right?
She was as trained as like I don't know if you ever talked to someone that been like a military officer for many years, or even not just a military officer. How about like someone's like a NCO or something? Just being in that life just really rigorously trains you into like a very, very specific human being. And yeah, I've got to step away, guys. I don't know. I should be back in 10, 15 minutes, but if I'm not, sorry, but I should.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. We're gonna.
I think we can wrap it up.
Yeah, we're gonna look.
Well,
we're gonna read the super chats and a couple comments. Dr. Montalban.
I just want to say while I'm thinking of it, if you are a rural person in the South or the Midwest and you're listening to this, your family has an Indian artifact or several. Yeah. It's just, that's, you know, people farmed, they picked up what they saw. I did it when I was a kid with my grandfather. Everybody's got something like that. And if it comes to the point where, you know, people fight over it, you know, inheriting it, or, you know, I would, before this happened, the topic of this chat happened, I would say donate it to a museum, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you get a tax write-off or something, but it would be in safe hands. Now, my advice would be to sell it or keep it or bury it yourself, because you're just giving stuff to people that the museum is going to turn around and give to some activist, and it'll be gone forever.
Never, ever let anthropologists on your land. Sorry, continue.
Yes, right. I want to mention what happened with Picture Cave. Picture Cave is the most famous, most important by far Mississippian culture iconography site. It's just outside of St. Louis. I believe the Bush family owned it and the land around it, and they used it for hunting, I think. Anyway, it was a rich family who did, and they sort of kept it. They didn't mess with it. They didn't bother it. They let archaeologists look at it, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, a few 2 or 3 years ago, they sold it. They put it up for auction, and the Osage had an absolute fit. The Osage tribe, that should be ours. That's our cultural ancestors. That's our literal ancestors. So they tried to buy it, and they failed. But I can remember when that happened, and I thought, even before these latest rules came out, I thought, if the Osage did succeed in buying it, or as they wanted it donated to them, archaeologists would never be able to study it again. It would be sealed up. It would be gone. The Choctaw bought their ancestral mound in Mississippi, and as far as I know, it's closed to the public. It's completely private. They use it for their religion, and that's cool and everything. But once so it's not just artifacts in this case. It's literal sites that are, as it were, returned or given to a foreign country, where the American public cannot ever benefit from it, and science can't benefit from it. They close it off to study. Now, I want to ask you, scholar, it may be different for historical sites and historical tribes, but I know prehistoric, pre-colonization sites. I thought of this when I watched that stupid debate between Hancock and Dibble on Joe Rogan, and Hancock said that archaeologists don't dig anymore. And I thought, as pertaining to America, he's kind of right, because as far as I know, the only digs on ancient sites, prehistoric sites, are salvage jobs. Like when they put a highway through, well, then, you've got to do an archaeology, blah, blah,
Private
blah.
archaeology, cultural resource management. It's not the same thing.
Right. You've got to do all that, which that is another patronage thing. But I agree with it. It's fine. But as far as I know, beyond salvage archaeology, there is no digging anymore. Is that right?
So no, there's some. There's definitely not as much as there used to be. And so there's archaeology, of course, that is the actual digging up of stuff. But the greater field, anthropology, that includes archaeology, I mean, there's much less direct work. There's very little participant observation. So cultural anthropology, what I do, there's very little of that being done in, it used to be done in the United States. Now it's like very rarely done in like even places you could still do it, like Papua New Guinea. It's viewed as like offensive to do. But there are some sites being dug still. I've done some across southern New England. I've probably like maybe 10 in total. But there's not as much as there used to be, and there's more of a concentration on these secondary characteristics. So or secondary studies. So either, compiling information in the sense that they're taking old stuff and they're making a new conclusion based on it, or they're like taking a new, and this is rampant in cultural anthropology, or they're running it through some like cultural Marxism, or like the critical theory lens of it to produce something new based on a new perspective. But what archaeology has the benefit of, and there's less funding for it, so there aren't a lot of huge things going on. It's gone out of style a little bit, but what helps archaeologists a little bit is that for their PhDs, they generally have to do an excavation themselves. And don't quote me on that. That might not be true, but there are still excavations going on, some of them, and not as much as there used to be. And unfortunately, there's more of this woke crap like coming into the field. So yeah, and also very good point on the historical sites being closed off. That's extraordinarily important. I'm glad you brought that up.
It's funny how arbitrary. Well, it's not arbitrary, but how this. It doesn't work. It doesn't work both ways. For example, I went to a place in West Virginia. It's a little town called Philippi. It's like the site of one of the first battles of the Civil War. There's a really old covered bridge there. Like it was built in like 1850. But when I went there, I went to this like the little historical society building, and this is like I don't know 20 years ago. So this might not still be true. But the woman said, "Oh, did you come here to see the mummies?" And I said, "Pardon me," because I wasn't aware of that. Because yeah. We have 2 mummies in the back. If you pay $1, you can go see them. And of course, I did that because who would turn that opportunity down? And apparently, in the 19th century, some basically mad scientist who lived in West Virginia took 2 dead ladies from the insane asylum and mummified them using his own special process. And their bodies have been basically on display ever since. Like these are 2 Christian American 19th century women. And their desiccated bodies are still on display. Now, I guess the difference between these 2 processes, imperatives, whatever, it really gets you thinking. But anyway, if you're ever in the neighborhood at Philippi, you can probably you probably have to pay $5 now. But yeah, you can see a mummy.
This goes back to your point, Merrick. This goes back to like the beginnings of archaeology, where in the old days it was like you can't dig that body up. It's even the beginning beginnings of science. Remember, the
Yeah.
body was sacred, and if you cut it open to study, a cadaver open to study it, you were doing a sacrilegious thing. Well, science won that argument, and now it's lost it again.
Well, it hasn't
It's
really
exactly,
because they don't mind to do that to you or me. But yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. But for special people, it's like,
Yeah.
well, no, that's sacred. You're not allowed to explore that in a scientific way. And it's like, I don't know. It just made me think that's a real year zero type thing. So
Yeah.
anyway,
All right, so let's do we'll do some super chats and a couple comments I wanted to hit. We'll get through them quickly. First super chat was from Bolero393. You can read this one's yours, Ill Scholar.
Yeah, we are now politically as well as demographically part of Latin America, complete with the caste race politics, although turned on its head. Dems will rig elections and prosecute chuds. Potable tap water next to go. I forgot he said that. I read that and laughed when he did originally. Thank you for that donation very much, man. I very much appreciate it.
Here's a comment I thought was interesting. If we're talking about Native history, I hope the denial of the Bering Land Bridge theory comes up. Can we cover this briefly?
Yeah. So the Bering Land Bridge, the bridge over from Russia. So people in the news articles talk about Clovis first, 12,000 years of Native American history, or Native American is in the Americas. So all of it, like Mayans and Aztecs, 12,000 year human history. That was the belief for a very long time. You were probably taught in school. I was. But the archaeological consensus, the anthropological consensus on this changed probably in the 90s, early 2000s. But mainstream culture hasn't even caught up to the anthropologists. So yes, there have been humans here before Clovis. Clovis first is dead. That's not real. But the Bering Land Bridge did happen. It was just a later wave of immigration. We know that from a lot of archaeological evidence.
But the earlier wave now, they were still people who crossed from Siberia, correct?
Yeah, that's the Bering Land Bridge. That did happen. It's just that the people crossing from Siberia that we were talking about at the time, that Bering Land Bridge, they just weren't the first people to come.
Right. But the first people, do we know, they came from Siberia as well, right? Or did we not know?
This gets into, there's arguments about this. This is one, like, there's a consensus between alternative archaeology guys like Jimmy Corsetti, Graham Hancock, about, like, there's consensus between them and mainstream archaeology that Clovis wasn't first, but there's not consensus on who was.
Yeah.
And unfortunately in archaeology, the way that archaeology is done, and like you said, not much digging is done, it's very labor intensive. You go down 10 centimeters at a time. And if you're doing legit anthropology, archaeology, it can take an hour or more, maybe a little less, depending on how quick you are, how much detail you're going into on your markings. But it can take an hour to go down 10 centimeters in a 1 meter plot, right? And you're doing multiple 1 meter plots at a site. So you're going down 10 centimeters. It takes you a long time to go down. So for the longest time, because of the assumption that we didn't go beyond 12,000 years ago, they wouldn't dig once they got to the stuff that was 12,000 years ago. Sometimes they wouldn't even go down that far because, it takes a lot of time. So they don't really dig that low. And people don't address this. That's a big defense of this is like, it's like, oh, we've never found anything from 60,000 years ago. It's like, you've never looked. You have never looked because you've never dug that far down, and you know that. And maybe in a few cases they have, but they haven't been pointed to sites that might have been that old. You won't know how to find them. So, like, yeah, we don't know. We don't know who the first people are. There's some evidence. There's like some footprints. There's all this evidence. There's some DNA evidence of, maybe Polynesians or indigenous Australians in South America. There's all this circumstantial little tidbits of information that point to certain things, but none of it's conclusive at this time or supported by enough. There's also there's evidence in that they recently proved. I did a thread on this on South American crops finding their way pre-European contact to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, which is where the Maui heads are, which implies contact between between Polynesians and South America. You know, there's other explanations, but it's very unlikely because of the distance to Chile. The closest country is like 3,000 miles. So they could have come on like a dead log or something, or birds, but it's not likely. Dems fortify election and jail the chuds. Valero, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Probably.
Yes, yes, that could actually happen. What do you think about Jacques de Mayhew on the Vikings on South America?
I don't know enough about it, unfortunately. I assume that's like the site up in Nova Scotia or something that points to there being Vikings. It's very possible. The problem with the Vikings, like even if they went there, they weren't there for very long. And I think they did. But this was around the time of the Little Ice Age. So everything froze up right at that time and they abandoned the settlement. And this was back when Greenland had a more mild climate before that Little Ice Age where it could be used. But the colder weather destroyed the viability of their settlement.
Lenzo Meadow.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Lenzo Meadow is legit. Yeah, it's up there in Canada, but that guy said South America. I've never heard that theory before, that Vikings went to South America.
Right. Yeah, there are some theories about this. I really don't know the specifics about that one. I have to look into that. I don't know anything about that.
Gringo Texan, real Gracky brother ours. America started as a Roman Republic LARP, and America's going to end as a Roman Republic LARP.
Oh, that's a terrific comment.
One more for you.
USA should be more like that part of Latin America. I remember the context in which he was talking. Maybe we don't mention it.
Bog already kind of read this one. George Washington, Andrew Jackson, William Henry Harrison, and many others rolling in their graves because Western men were too merciful to the vanquished. No comment. I'm not getting in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Yeah, I think that's
There was one more for me. All of it was from Bolero. Thank you, Bolero, for giving me a bunch of money. I appreciate that. But he asked, like very recently, how many on the panel will be at the Old Glory Club event? I was thinking about going. I'm not going to go. Just like it's a whole thing because it's like away from the airport, and I was going to drive, and I asked Erik if he wanted to go. He doesn't want to go, but so yeah, I'm not going to be there. I don't know if you guys are.
No. I will say, about the vanquished and the victors, there was a mutual respect between those leaders and the natives. Well, or maybe not mutual, but they respected the fighting spirit of the natives. And we named a lot of stuff after Native American tribes. They Bog Beef alluded to it earlier. The kind of the way the Romans viewed the Carthaginians and other people after they defeated them. It wasn't the entirely acrimonious. That's not
Jackson
the worst way.
Jackson adopted an Indian as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
which is funny considering his. I don't know what's the opposite of his dehabilitation. It used to be. It was, I think, that latest Sailor post where he was talking about a 2006 Time rating of the most influential Americans, and Andrew Jackson was number 18. That was in 2006 or something like that. That wouldn't happen now. He is regarded as one of our greatest villains. But on this podcast, we are Andrew Jackson respecters. He was one of our, if not our greatest president. That's just how it is.
Yeah, ended the Federal Reserve, the first one.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Enchiladas. I appreciate that, brother. Really do.
Good show. Yeah, it was a good show. I appreciate you guys joining us. I'm so glad you were here, Dr. Montalban, because I just don't know a lot about Native American history, and you two guys are very knowledgeable on the subject. I think everybody learned a lot from it.
Yeah, we might have to, Doctor, if you're interested, we might have to have another conversation, talk about this stuff more.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I had fun. This was a good show.
Yes, well, Bog's not here to say WBSapparel.com. Go see it, and thank y'all for joining us.